Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a world of iron blades, creaking longships, and smoky wooden halls. But don't worry, this isn't one of those Viking stories. There are no thunder gods or battlefield screams, just a man, a snore, and a very, very bad morning. You're about to meet the Viking who forgot to pillage, and somehow, against all odds and expectations, he lived to tell the tale. The fire's gone out. That's the first thing you notice. The coals are cold, your wool blanket is damp, and outside your window, there's silence. But not the peaceful kind. No morning songs, no footsteps, not even the sharp laughter of the Jarl's crew preparing for departure. You shoot up in your straw bed, heart pounding. Then comes the horrifying realization. They're gone. You were supposed to be on that ship, supposed to stand on that deck, axe in hand, howling at the sky with the rest of them. You had one job: wake up, follow orders, raid a monastery, and come back soaked in silver and self-satisfaction. But instead, you're still in your undertunic, hair matted to one side, a dried berry stuck to your cheek, while the entire village is off conquering something without you. Your mouth goes dry, not because you're afraid. No, not yet. That comes later. Right now, you're panicking in that particular Viking way that involves loud internal swearing and imagining exile, flogging, or worse, dish duty. You lurch out of bed and race to the dock. No sails, no shouting, no longship. Gone. You missed the raid. That's not just embarrassing. That's near treasonous. You turn around slowly, praying no one noticed. But of course, they did. The old woman, who always smells like dried onions, is standing there with one eyebrow arched so high it's in Valhalla. A sheep trots by, pauses, and actually bleats at you like it knows. You nod solemnly at it, trying to pretend you woke up early on purpose for, very important village duties. You grab the nearest thing with hooves. Turns out it's a goat, and begin herding it toward the pasture. Badly. You talk to the goat like it's part of a plan. Right then, we'll just patrol the fence line. That's what warriors do between pillages. The goat, to its credit, doesn't object. But the kid standing near the bakery does. He's maybe 10, smirking, already planning to nickname you something awful. Miss the boat? He chirps. No, you say too fast. I was assigned to stay. Guard duty. The kid squints. With a goat. You don't answer. You just keep walking, dragging your newly adopted four-legged alibi behind you. If you squint hard enough, maybe you can convince yourself this is all a misunderstanding. A temporary setback. Maybe the Jarl will sail back in a few days and you can join the return raid. Or maybe you'll sneak aboard a merchant ship. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll wake up and realize it was a dream. Unfortunately, the dream ends when you trip on your own bootlace, land in a puddle, and get a snoutful of very real goat breath. At that moment, A single thought pierces your soul like a cursed spear. You're the Viking who forgot to pillage. The goats wander. The village bustles. You, on the other hand, are stranded in shame. And worse, there's nothing to do. No enemies to stab, no monasteries to loot, no dramatic speeches to shout over the wind. You sit on a rock and try to calculate how many days it will take before someone writes a saga about you. Probably not a flattering one. And that's when the Jarl's steward approaches. He doesn't say a word at first, just looks at you, then looks at the goat, then back at you. You attempt a smile. Important livestock duty. He crosses his arms. You missed the boat. No. You lie again, weaker this time. You were drooling into straw while everyone else boarded. That's not a warrior. That's a lazy ox with hair. Harsh, accurate, and not even the worst part. New orders, he says, handing you a wooden bucket. You look inside. Moldy rye bread and a few hunks of cheese that might be older than the goat. You tilt your head. Lunch? No, he says. You're being reassigned. To what? He points behind him, past the barns, toward a structure that smells like despair and poor life choices. To latrine rotation. You stare at the bucket, then at the goat. The goat seems genuinely sorry for you. That's when it hits you. This is your life now. You're not a warrior, you're a bucket boy. And no one forgets the bucket boy. Not in Viking history. Not in bedtime stories. Not in your dreams. But maybe, just maybe, that's not the end of your tale. You trudge toward the latrine with all the joy of a snail being volunteered for catapult duty. The bucket sloshes ominously, and not in a treasure chest full of silver kind of way. More like biohazard stew with hints of sheep sort of way. It's heavy. Your pride is heavier. No one makes eye contact. You pass the baker's wife, who gives you a look that says, I knew you'd end up like this. The blacksmith's apprentice snorts as you limp by. Even the ravens seem to caw in judgment. Or maybe they're just laughing. The latrine is exactly what you'd expect. A wooden shack that leans slightly to one side, like it's trying to flee its own existence. The door creaks. Inside, it smells like fermented vengeance. You close it behind you and sigh, because apparently this is where mist dreams go to ferment. But here's the strange part. The moment you sit down and get to work, miserable, yes, but methodical, you start to notice things. Little things. A carved rune on the back of the wooden bench, probably done by a bored teenager decades ago. It reads something like, Thrain was here, and he hated it. A broken bead glinting under the floorboards. Maybe it fell off someone's braid. Maybe it belonged to a girl named Astrid, or a raider who never came back. You wonder who sat here before you. You wonder what they thought about. And then you wonder what you're thinking about. Because this was not the plan. You were going to be a warrior, a raider, a legend. You practiced sword drills in the rain, memorized shield formations, and even stopped biting your nails to look more intimidating. But here you are, elbow deep in a future that smells like defeat and dried urine. Still, something shifts. You notice how efficient the waste pit is. Someone engineered this thing carefully. Sloped boards, drainage lines, air holes. You wipe your brow and look again. It's almost impressive. And it hits you. Even this has purpose. Viking villages didn't survive just because of warriors. They thrived because someone made sure the waste didn't poison the water. Because someone dug the pits, rotated the straw, and burned the night soil when no one else would. There's honor in that. Somewhere, probably, you mutter, "I'm still a Viking," under your breath. The goat outside sneezes like it disagrees. You ignore it. The hours pass. At some point, you clean off the tools and walk around the edge of the village just for air. Your arms ache. You smell like a failed experiment. But you notice things others don't. The blacksmith's cooling trough has a crack. The baker's firewood stack leans dangerously toward the smokehouse. And then, out of the corner of your eye, you see it. The old fisherman's net, tangled, discarded, nearly useless, has trapped something shiny. You step closer and pull it out. Not a fish, not even a coin. A dagger, small, curved, and dulled at the edge. But there's something familiar about the handle. You scrape off the grime and realize it's edged with a mark you've seen before. Your brother's. He was on the ship, which means he dropped it or left it. Why? You hold it tightly. Suddenly, the goat headbutts your shin. You stagger and look down. It's munching on your tunic. You yank it away, but not before it tears a strip near the hem. You mutter something you're glad no one heard and tie the cloth around your wrist. A strange thought occurs to you. If this was your story, your saga, what would they call it? The saga of the goat-bitten warrior. The one who cleaned and found a dagger. No, too long. Too weird. Too accurate. Still, the dagger changes something. You slip it into your belt and feel a little taller. Not because you're planning to use it, but because it reminds you that you still have roots in that world. A blade, even a forgotten one, is a symbol. A whisper that says, "You're not done yet." Later that night, you return to your tiny hut, alone, sore, and determined not to smell yourself. You wash with cold water, change into your cleanest, well, least stained tunic, and sit by your hearth. It's not glorious, it's not legendary, but it's warm. And somewhere in that flickering firelight, you decide, if you're stuck here, you'll make yourself useful. Maybe not in the way people expect, but in the way that keeps the village running, quietly, unnoticed, and you're starting to think, maybe that's okay. After all, the Jarl can have his plunder. You've got goats, and maybe, just maybe, a different kind of story to tell. The morning breaks cold and slow, with a sky like wet wool, and the wind cutting sideways through your bones. You step outside, wrapped in your cloak, dagger tucked discreetly under your belt. Not because you're expecting a duel, but because it makes you feel just a little more like a Viking and a little less like a misplaced turnip scrubber. The village is stirring. Smoke curls lazily from chimney holes, and the sound of boots in wet mud is joined by chickens complaining about absolutely nothing. You nod at a passing boy hauling firewood, and he nods back like he doesn't quite know who you are. Fair enough. You don't know either. You decide to report to someone, anyone, who looks vaguely like they know what's happening. Enter Sigrun. Sigrun is not the Jarl, but she is the Jarl's sister, and arguably more terrifying. She stands by the granary, arms folded, brows arched like question marks designed to stab. Her boots are spotless. Her hair is braided into a crown of authority. You step into her shadow with the quiet confidence of someone who's recently conquered a goat. Back from your voyage? She asks, without looking at you. You clear your throat. Didn't make it past the fjord. She snorts. Figures. You wait, but she says nothing else. Just gestures at a pile of crates that need lifting. So you lift. Not gloriously, not heroically, just practically. Grain sacks go here. Dried cod goes there. Someone's aunt yells about moisture. You listen. You adjust. You learn. And slowly, something strange happens. People stop sneering quite so much. Someone tosses you a better set of gloves. Someone else hands you a bowl of hot stew without making a joke about your failed voyage. You're still the one who didn't raid. But now, you're also the one who fixed the roof. The one who hauled the salted herring. The one who found the leak in the bathhouse. It's not glory. It's gravity. You become the thing people lean on. By midday, you're helping Sigrun inventory supplies for winter. You learn that dried apples are rare this year, that someone's been sneaking extra honey, and that the southern storage has a weevil problem so bad the bread crunches before you chew. And just like that, you've learned more about the real pulse of the village than a dozen raids would teach you. Because behind every warrior on a boat, there's 100 hands making sure they have boots, salted fish, and a reason to return. You're starting to see that. But it doesn't stop the ache. That other life, the one you dreamed about, is still there, scratching at the edge of your chest. You miss the sound of sails flapping, the chaos of oar rhythm, the promise of gold and stories and distant firelight. You miss the idea of being more than useful, of being remembered. That night, You slip down to the shoreline. The tide has pulled back, leaving a strip of glistening rock and driftwood. You stand there, cold wind on your face, watching the sea. It doesn't care. It doesn't miss you. You sit anyway, because it still matters. Beside you, nestled under a chunk of washed-up timber, you spot something. A leather strap, worn and half-buried. You dig carefully and find what looks like a broken helm. The kind used by the younger fighters. Not iron. Wood reinforced with hide. Splintered at the edge, but still whole enough to carry memories. You run your thumb along the rim. There's a scratch inside. A name. Tor. He was one of yours. Was. No one said it aloud, but you saw the look when the ship returned without him. You carry the helm back, not because it changes anything, but because it matters. The next morning you hang it on the wall of the longhouse, quietly, no speech, no ceremony, just truth. And the others notice, not right away, but over time. Someone places a small carving beside it, a horse. Another leaves a strip of blue-dyed cloth, and it becomes a corner of memory. No one planned it. It just grew, like moss. One morning, Sigrun finds you there. She says nothing for a long time, just stands beside you. Then softly, "You still want to fight?" You shrug. "I still want to matter." She nods. "You do." That night, you dream of Tor, not sailing, not dying, just laughing the way he used to after too much mead. You wake with wet eyes. No one sees. That's fine. You get up, pull on your tunic, and go fix the fence. And for the first time, it feels like more than just a chore. It feels like a chapter. Your chapter. A light drizzle coats the village roofs in a sheen that glistens like oil on steel. You walk through the mist just after dawn, shoulders hunched, boots squelching in a mud that somehow seems older than time itself. Overhead, gulls scream at each other like married couples, and somewhere nearby, a baby is already crying. Another long, normal Viking morning. You're not raiding. You're not swinging a sword. But you are strangely part of something now. Your hands are calloused in different places. Less from gripping an axe, more from hauling water and smoothing wood. You've learned how to patch a torn net, how to stop a chicken from panicking, and how to measure grain with nothing but a carved bowl and instinct. You've become, in the most non-epic sense possible, dependable. But you still don't feel complete. Then comes news. A messenger arrives on horseback, soaked to the bones and practically foaming at the mouth. Not his horse, him. He stumbles into the longhouse, dripping like a drowned rat in armor, and delivers the update. A neighboring village is requesting aid. Not warriors, not gold, just workers. Their main hall burned down in a lightning storm, and winter isn't waiting politely at the door. The Jarl is away. Sigrun looks around the hall, eyes settling on you. "Well, she says. You blink. Well, what? You've been stacking roof beams and hauling logs like a madman, ready to put it to good use. And just like that, you're leading a group of 4 to the neighboring settlement. 3 freemen and 1 surly thrall who coughs like he's made entirely of ash. You don't bring swords. You bring saws, hammers, rope, salted meat, and 2 barrels of nails that jingle like coins, but are, in truth, far more valuable. The ride takes a day and a half. The landscape blurs into mossy hills, sudden cliffs, and fog-thick forests. Ravens follow you. One of the freemen swears that means someone in the group is fated to die. You ignore him and hand him a strip of dried cod. When you arrive, the village looks like the back end of a dragon's bad day. Blackened beams sag inward. The longhouse, or what's left of it, smells like wet charcoal and regret. A few villagers eye you with suspicion, unsure whether this is help or invasion. But you drop your supplies with a clatter, roll up your sleeves, and start working. At first, it's chaos. No one agrees on the plan. The rope knots won't hold. Someone spills the nails. Twice. But then you take over. Not loudly, not dramatically. You just point, direct, adjust. One beam gets lifted, then another. By the 3rd day, the new frame is up, and you're covered in soot, sweat, and pine resin. You look like something that crawled out of a forest fire. But when you laugh, the villagers laugh with you, not at you. By the 6th day, someone hands you a carved mug of warmed honey mead and says you're welcome anytime, even if you're the Viking who didn't pillage. You don't correct them. On the 7th day, a group of warriors returns from a short raid, bloodless but successful. They look at the new hall, then at you. You brace for mockery. Instead, one claps you on the back so hard, you nearly drop your mead. You build this? You nod cautiously. He grins. Not bad. Ugly roof, but solid. It's high praise. In Viking anyway. That night, you sit by the fire, listening to stories about gods and monsters, about a man who once challenged Thor to an eating contest and almost won. You realize something strange. You're still not the hero of the story, but you're part of it, and that's enough. Before leaving, you carve your name, just your initials, into the underside of one of the new beams. Not for vanity, just as a whisper. That way, if the roof ever falls again, someone might see it and wonder, who was this? Who helped? Who stayed? On the ride home, the thrall finally stops coughing long enough to mutter something that might be thanks. Or maybe he's asking for water. Either way, you pass him the canteen. You return to your village quieter than when you left. Not because you're sad, because you're processing something bigger than pride. Something like purpose. Historians still argue whether Norse culture truly valued those who stayed behind over those who went to war. The sagas worship raiders, but the graves of farmers are sometimes more lavish. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. You start noticing things differently. You see who fixes the fishing lines before dawn, who helps the old man find his walking stick, who notices when the candles are low in the shrine room. Heroes, all of them, unwritten, but very much alive. The wind smells like wet moss and sheep again. You swear it always does when something's about to shift. And shift it does. Because just as you settle back into your predictable rhythms, splitting wood, mending a wall, teaching a small child how not to stab themselves with a fishhook, the longhouse receives a visitor. She is taller than you, older than you, and she wears more bone jewelry than a burial site. Her hair is streaked with white and wound up in a braid that looks like it could strangle a raven mid-flight. No one dares speak while she enters. Even the fire quiets. She's a vulva, a seeress, a woman of visions. You're told not to stare. You do anyway. She moves slowly, leaning on a carved staff crowned with feathers and bits of metal. Her cloak is soaked through, but she doesn't seem to mind. Or maybe she doesn't notice. People say she dreams while walking, and that time doesn't always behave around her. You try to shuffle away. Not your business. Definitely not your skill set. But she looks at you. Not through you. At you. Like you're a puzzle she vaguely remembers solving once, incorrectly. Then she says it. You dream like someone who doesn't know he's awake. Rude. Accurate. You're not sure how to reply. She sits by the hearth, accepting a bowl of broth like it's a king's feast. A silence spreads as people wait for her to speak again. But instead of sharing prophecy or doom, or some dire warning involving wolves eating the moon, she talks about buttons. I once saw a town that made buttons out of fish scales, she says. Tiny things, like coin slivers. You'd lose one and weep for it. This seems irrelevant. You look at Sigrun, she just shrugs. But the vulva's not finished. They made them for a man who forgot how to kill, didn't lose his arms, didn't lose his blade, just forgot. So they put him in the button house, said he was safer there. People glance at you. Your spine shivers. She doesn't name you, but she doesn't have to. The next morning, she's gone. No goodbye, no omens. Just the faint smell of pine tar and herbs clinging to the floorboards where she sat. And one very small, fish scale-shaped button left on the hearthstone. You pick it up. You don't know why. It feels like it belongs in your pouch. As the days go on, that strange interaction becomes folklore. Kids whisper about it. A few think you've been cursed. A few think you're special. Most just forget. But you don't. You dream differently after that. Instead of blood and thunder, you dream of roofs collapsing in snow, of bees buzzing in tree hollows, of ink-stained fingers flipping pages you can't read. One night, you dream of the sea swallowing a fleet and waking up with tears you didn't put there. You start asking questions. How do sails get stitched? What wood bends best without cracking? How many kinds of fire are there? Questions no one else thinks to ask. Questions that make you useful in a different way. And slowly, you stop being just the one who didn't raid. You become the one who knows things. When a child breaks a bone, they bring them to you before the healer. When a rope frays, they ask if you have a better weave. When someone's sheep gives birth to twins, they want you there. Not because you know what to do, but because you're calm, and that feels close enough to wisdom. Your hands aren't softer, they're steadier. Even your beard seems more dignified. One afternoon, while carving new pegs for a barrel, you hear a voice behind you. You ever think of leaving? It's the thrall, the same one who coughed like a dying fireplace on the road months ago. Now he walks, with less of a slump, more muscle on his arms, and a strange light behind his eyes. You shake your head. No point. He nods like he gets it, then mutters, "I would." You stare at the peg in your hand. It looks like a tooth. You place it in the barrel rim and tap it home. Later that night, you find the thrall gone. Took a fishing skiff. No one bothers chasing. If he lives, he lives. You hope he finds buttons. Historians still argue whether Volvars were taken seriously by everyone or only feared when convenient. Some accounts say they advised kings. Others say they were mocked and left to starve. But one thing's certain. When they spoke, the world listened, even if it didn't understand. And when they left, they took the world with them. That button, you carry it still, not as a symbol, as a question. Why you? Why now? And what does it mean? When someone forgets how to kill, but remembers how to build. The morning fog is thick enough to chew. It curls low around your boots as you walk the perimeter of the village, more out of habit than duty. You've become the unofficial watcher, part scout, part worrywart, part fence inspector. Your hand brushes the top of a split rail post, damp and moss slick. A raven lands a few steps ahead, eyes glittering. You nod at it like you've done every day for the past month. It nods back. No one ever taught you how to be a raven whisperer. It just sort of happened after the button. The village is quieter lately, not in a sad way, just steadier. People get up, do things, grunt, share bread, and go to sleep again. But more and more, they've started checking in with you. Do you think the ice will break soon? Have you seen signs of the boar herd moving? Did the Volva say anything else? Stranger. And you answer. Not because you know, but because you've learned how to listen. To the wind in the thatch, to the shift in a goat's bleating, to the weight behind someone's silence. That's new. You used to talk too fast, swing too wide, jump to conclusions. Now, you wait. You've become the hearthstone people lean against without knowing it. And then the Jarl returns with his warriors. They look like they've walked through a bonfire. Torn cloaks, mud-caked boots. One guy is missing half an eyebrow. Another has a bloody fishhook still stuck in his helmet. They were supposed to raid a small monastery up the coast. Easy job. Gold, silver, and not many defenders. Turns out, it wasn't undefended after all. You stand at the edge of the gathering crowd as they tell the tale, how they hit a wall of arrows the moment they set foot on the sand, how the tide turned too fast and stranded their ships, how the monks of all people were prepared. Traps, oil, fire. We lost 6, the Jarl says, voice low. He doesn't mention that one of them was his cousin. But you notice the clench in his jaw. You also notice the stink. Sweat, iron, seaweed, and defeat. It sticks to them like guilt. That night, the longhouse is heavy with silence. Even the children are quiet, as if the smoke from the hearth has thickened into memory. You're asked to fetch water. Not because no one else can, but because people know you'll do it without questions. At the stream, you stare at your reflection. The moonlight makes your face look older, or maybe wiser. You can't decide. When you return, the Jarl is waiting by the door. I need to speak with you, he says. Your spine straightens like it's hearing a command it hasn't heard in years. Inside, he sits you down, offers mead, doesn't speak until the cup is half empty. You fought beside me once. You nod. You didn't return with us. Another nod. I didn't know if I should kill you or thank you. That one you don't nod to. He exhales sharply through his nose, then continues. I've been watching, and I see what you are now, what you've become. You brace yourself. You're not a raider. He says it like a truth he's been choking on. You're a keeper. You blink. You keep the fences mended. You keep the children quiet. You keep the goats alive. You keep us from falling apart when the world bites. That's not an insult. He finishes his drink and stands. I'm not asking you to fight again, he says, but I am asking you to stay. As he walks away, you stare at the cup. It smells like honey and moss and something older. You sip. It's warm. Historians still argue whether Viking Jarls truly respected those who chose not to raid. Some believe such individuals were seen as cowards, outcasts. Others argue they were valued as anchors, the hearth dwellers who kept the village running while the swords danced abroad. You start noticing things differently after that. Not in big ways, just noticing. Like how the fire in the longhouse always leans slightly eastward after a hard wind. Or how the goats prefer one patch of grass. even though it looks exactly like the others. Or how the raven visits more often, brings gifts even, a pebble, a feather, once a bit of cloth stained with blue pigment. You're not sure what any of it means, but that doesn't stop you from keeping it all in a small woven pouch you've started carrying on your belt, right next to the fish scale button. People stop calling you the one who forgot to pillage. They start calling you keeper, and for the first time, you don't flinch when they do. You wake to the smell of damp earth and someone singing off key. The voice is thin, but it weaves through the morning like smoke, carrying bits of melody through the village's slow stirrings. You recognize it instantly. It's Ulf, the boy with the crooked teeth and the obsession with birds. He's singing about a horse that could fly and a cat that guarded treasure under a waterfall. It doesn't make sense, but that's never stopped a good story. You sit up slowly, bones creaking in the chilly dawn. A thin mist clings to the grass, curling around the legs of the goats like lazy fog serpents. You toss on your cloak, still slightly damp from last night's dew, and head toward the sound. Ulf is standing on a rock, one arm raised like a bard addressing kings. Except he's facing a chicken coop. The chickens are unimpressed. One pecks his foot. "Maybe I need a better audience," he says when he sees you. "Maybe you need a better song," you reply, and his grin widens like a cracked sunbeam. You notice something then, the way Ulf waits for your answer, like it matters, like you matter, and maybe you do. Not as a warrior or a wanderer, but as something rarer, a dependable voice in a world where too many go silent. You help him down and notice a rough wooden carving sticking out of his pocket. A figure, vaguely bird-shaped. "Made it for you," he mutters, suddenly shy. It's misshapen, lopsided, and absolutely perfect. You tie it to your pouch beside the raven gifts. You spend the rest of the morning with small things, checking traps, patching a leak in a roof, teaching a girl how to twist rope from sheep's wool. Nothing grand, nothing worthy of a saga, but still real. And there's something sacred in the way the sun filters through thatched eaves, or the way soap bubbles glisten in a shared wash basin, or how the village now leans toward you without even realizing it. You catch snippets of conversations. Ask the keeper. See what they think. They'll know what to do. Not the blacksmith or the seer or the fighter. You. Somehow, that quiet, ordinary title feels weightier than a sword. There's an old woman who sits by the fire each night, spinning wool with gnarled fingers and muttering half songs from her youth. She never speaks to you, just hums louder when you walk by. But tonight, she lifts her head. "You stayed," she says. You pause, unsure what she means. Most don't. They burn too hot or run too far. But you stayed. She offers no further explanation, just goes back to spinning. Historians still argue whether Vikings had defined community roles beyond the obvious. Jarls, thralls, warriors, skalds. Some suggest there were unofficial hearth keepers, people who never took titles but held villages together through care and consistency. You're not sure what label fits you now. You only know that you don't miss the raids, or the blood, or the empty swagger. You walk the edge of the fields and hear laughter. Not the raucous kind that comes with too much mead, but the soft, sun-drenched kind that happens when two friends try to teach a goat to climb a log. It doesn't work, but the goat seems entertained anyway. You smile, not because it's funny, but because it's alive. You remember your old self, the restless foot, the hungry eye, the one who stared at the horizon like it owed you something. That version of you might have scoffed at this life, called it dull, boring, domestic. But that version of you didn't sleep this well, or laugh this softly, or get gifts from children and ravens. That version of you would never understand how a small boy's off-key singing could make your chest ache in the best way. That version of you would have missed everything that matters. You reach into your pouch, fingers brushing the wooden bird. It's rough, imperfect, hand-carved, but it's yours. And for once, you don't want to let it go. The wind changes. You feel it in your bones before it rustles a single leaf. A whisper, cold and unfamiliar, curling around your ankles like something that doesn't quite belong. It's the kind of wind that carries news, whether you want it or not. You're standing by the smokehouse, checking the roof that never quite stops leaking when you see them. Riders, distant silhouettes on the ridge, 3 of them. Just far enough to make details guesswork, just close enough to make everyone uneasy. The village holds its breath. Chores pause mid-motion. Children get herded indoors with quiet urgency. One of the dogs growls low and uncertain. You step forward. You're not armed, just holding a half-mended rope and a piece of salted fish. But something about the way you move makes the blacksmith's apprentice inch closer to your side, holding a hammer like it might be useful. The riders don't attack. They don't call out. They just watch for a few minutes, then turn and vanish back into the trees. But the damage is done. Fear is a scent, and tonight, it's thick in the longhouse. People whisper of raiders, of rival clans, of angry gods or jealous spirits. Some even mutter your name. Not with blame, with expectation. Like this is your moment to, what? Take up a sword again? Ride out and confront ghosts? Instead, you just nod and say, let's keep the fires low tonight. Sometimes, leadership doesn't mean barking orders. Sometimes, it's giving people a story they can hold on to. So you invent one. A traveling merchant, you say, probably lost, didn't want to intrude. Is it true? Who knows? But it calms the room enough for stew to keep simmering. and for small jokes to return to the table. You sit near the fire with your bowl, listening to Ulf retell his flying horse saga with added battle goats and magical mushrooms. He gets applause. Someone throws him a crust of bread. You notice, though, how the old woman's spinning wheel is still. Her eyes are fixed on the door, as if she's listening for footsteps no one else can hear. Outside, you check the traps again, more out of habit than hope. One's been sprung, but whatever triggered it is gone. You crouch near the disturbed earth and see footprints. Human, not yours, not anyone from here. The print is deeper than normal. Someone carrying weight, a bag maybe, or armor. It's not a big footprint though, not a warrior. Not unless they're unusually small and light. You wipe the mud flat again. Back in the longhouse, the candlelight feels thinner. You offer to stay up for first watch. No one argues. As the fire dies down, you wrap yourself in a cloak that still smells faintly of ash and sweat and meadowsweet. You sit near the door, a bone-handled knife in your lap. Not because you plan to use it, but because your hands need something to hold. Outside, the wind is up again. It carries distant sounds, a branch snapping, a cough, maybe even the low hum of a lullaby sung in the wrong key. You remember nights like this from your raiding days. Towns watching from windows, convinced monsters were coming. Funny how the roles shift. Historians still debate whether Viking villages had organized militias or relied entirely on the leadership of jarls and warriors. Some argue for night watch rotations, informal and familial. Others believe it was always one person, quiet, trusted, who stayed up with the stars. Tonight, that's you. You don't see anything else, but your dreams, when they come, are strange. You're standing on a foreign shore, sword in hand, surrounded by men who look just like you, but who sneer when you speak. You try to explain you're not here to raid, but your voice comes out garbled like you're underwater. You wake with a start, the dawn bleeding pale across the village fields. And at the edge of the clearing, a bundle. You walk toward it slowly, wary of traps. It's a package wrapped in oiled cloth, tied with a single strand of blue wool. You undo it with care. Inside is bread, still warm, a carved fish, and a note etched into birch bark. I know what you chose. I remember too. You stare at it for a long time. Then you pick it up and carry it back into the longhouse, like it's just another piece of firewood. Whatever's coming, it knows you. But you're ready, because you didn't forget. And maybe, just maybe, you're not the only one. You don't speak of the bundle, not out loud, not when the others wake and begin the day with sleepy complaints and cracking joints. Not when the morning chores resume in their usual crumbling rhythm. Not even when Kari, the sharp-eyed weaver, pauses by your seat and sniffs the unfamiliar bread you're pretending to eat, like you didn't find it wrapped in mystery. She doesn't ask. She just watches your face for a heartbeat longer than necessary, then moves on. The unspoken pact of the village at work. Some truths are like soup bones. You let them simmer quietly until the flavor tells you more. Still, the note keeps tugging at your thoughts like a loose thread in your tunic. I know what you chose. I remember too. You fold the birch bark and tuck it into the thatch above your bed. Not hidden, just out of view. A small act of control. You don't know who left it, but you know they're not done. Midday sun filters through the smoke hole, dust swirling like lazy ghosts. You wander outside, drawn to the place you once buried the tools from your raiding days. You dig slowly, carefully, as if afraid of waking something. The earth gives way to the bundle, leather-wrapped, worn, and familiar. Inside, your old seax. The blade is spotted with rust, but the edge still holds memory. Alongside it, a bronze bracelet from Ireland, dented by someone's helmet during a brawl long ago. And curiously, a child's carved wooden horse, faded but intact. You'd forgotten that part, or maybe you wanted to. You hold the items in your lap, the weight of them unexpected after all this time. Not just physical weight, emotional heft too. You had buried these things for a reason, but now you feel something shifting. Historians still argue whether Viking warriors retired from battle or were expected to die with sword in hand. Some evidence suggests older warriors transitioned to farming, storytelling, or religious roles. Others believe once you tasted blood and salt, you never truly stepped away. You don't know which category you belong to. You're still breathing. But you feel something stirring, something unfinished. As if summoned, a boy runs from the direction of the fields, breathless and flailing. "Stranger," he gasps. "At the river." You're already standing before he finishes. You follow him past the grazing goats and down a narrow trail lined with nettles and young ash trees. The river is quiet, just bird song and the soft rush of water over stone. And then you see her, a woman kneeling by the riverbank. Her cloak is wrong for this region, too finely stitched with patterns unfamiliar. She's washing something red that isn't dye. Her movements are practiced, calm, like she's done this before. She glances up, and you know her. Or rather, you recognize something in her eyes. The same look you had when you stepped off your last raid and didn't board another ship. That hollow defiance. That refusal to keep pretending. She says nothing, just dips the fabric again. You kneel beside her without asking. And together, you wash the blood out of a cloth neither of you owns. After a while, you speak. "You left too." She doesn't answer, but she doesn't leave either. The silence is a story of its own. Later, she returns with you to the village. The others watch, curious but cautious. She gives no name, just sets her back by the hearth and asks for work. Kari hands her a spindle. The stranger takes it like it's a sword. Life resumes. Kind of. But you notice the changes. The bundle by your bed, untouched for years, now feels like it watches you. The villagers begin checking the perimeter more often, mending fences that had been leaning for seasons. The dogs bark more at dusk. Something's coming. That much is certain. You find yourself sharpening the old axe in the evenings, not because you plan to use it, but because the sound of it feels familiar, grounding, like breathing through stone. The stranger, too, sharpens things. Not blades. Her eyes. She listens, learns who snores, who forgets to lock the goat pen, who leaves their ale unattended. She watches the wind. You catch her once, reading the sky like it's a scroll. And one night, she speaks. They never forgave you. You don't ask who they are. You don't need to, because neither did you. That night, sleep feels like walking through water. Slow, heavy, and full of shapes you can't quite see. You drift in and out, the firelight flickering across the thatched ceiling, shadows curling like forgotten runes. She doesn't sleep either. You hear her rise before the embers die, footsteps soft but deliberate. You keep your eyes closed, just listening. The door opens, then closes, then silence. You sit up, swing your legs off the cot, and pause. You could stay. Pretend you didn't hear. Pretend this whole thing, the note, the bread, the blood-soaked cloth, was just the village playing tricks on a man who once mattered. But no, you wrap your cloak around your shoulders and follow her. The cold bites, but you don't mind. There's something about walking through a village at night that sharpens the senses. You pass the goats, quiet, the fields, empty, the river still, except for one heron balanced like a spirit on a rock. You find her near the old burial mounds, crouched beside a hollow tree. She's holding something, a pendant, simple, carved bone with a hole in the center, threaded with a strip of sinew. Not hers, not from this village, yours. You recognize it instantly. You gave it to someone once. A boy, not your son. At least, not that you ever knew for sure. But someone you fought beside. Someone who laughed with blood in his teeth and cried when his dog died. He wore it always. You never saw it again after Lindisfarne. She turns to you, and in the low light, her expression is unreadable. They sent me to find you, she says softly, but they didn't say what to do once I did. You wait. Let the words hang. You were supposed to lead again. Historians still argue whether Viking warbands had standing hierarchies, or if leadership was earned raid by raid, through charisma, loot, or brute survival. Some sagas speak of jarls, others of men chosen by casting lots or divine signs. But the pattern is clear. Those who stopped leading became myths or threats. You, apparently, became both. I won't, you reply. Not a whisper, not a challenge, just fact. She nods, like she knew you'd say that, like she needed to hear it spoken to believe it. Still, she presses the pendant into your hand. Then at least wear it when they come. It's not a warning, it's a schedule. You both walk back to the village in silence. In the days that follow, the air changes. Even the trees seem denser. Branches leaning in to listen. Children whisper more. Dogs growl at shadows. A raven perches on the watchpost and doesn't leave. You carve. You mend tools. You help patch the roof after a windstorm. Normal things. But the world around you is holding its breath, and you feel it in your bones. Then a rider. Not a Viking. Not exactly. A man in a patched cloak, riding a pony too small for speed, but strong enough for distance. He doesn't stop to speak, just drops something at the village gate and turns back toward the forest. A sack. You open it with the others watching. Inside, ash. A single boot, and half of a carved bowl you once traded for in Hedeby. A message. Not subtle. You glance at the stranger. She doesn't look surprised. They're gathering. A small fleet, not a raid. A purge. You raise an eyebrow. Of me? Of what you stand for? The village doesn't vote. There's no town hall meeting. But people start moving, shifting valuables, reinforcing walls, sharpening tools. Even Kari begins weaving new cloaks with urgency. They know what's coming, and they choose to stay. It surprises you. For all the years you spent fearing the retribution of your past, you assumed no one would stand beside you. But here they are, mending fence posts and setting snares and mixing pitch to thicken the firewall near the west tree line. You still don't know why, but you stop asking. One evening, the stranger asks if you'll speak to the children. You blink at her, surprised. About what? About who you were. You sit on a low stool by the hearth, and they gather around, wide-eyed, clutching turnips and crusts of barley bread. And you tell them stories. You don't glorify. You don't exaggerate. You talk about what it felt like to cross the sea in freezing wind, the sting of salt in your nose, the rattle of swords beside your knees. You talk about fear, about regret, about singing songs in languages you didn't understand just to keep from crying. You leave out names, mostly. One child asks if you killed people. You say yes. Another asks why you stopped. You say, because I wanted to live. Simple. True. Historians still argue whether Viking culture romanticized death to the extent the saga suggests, or whether most people, like you, eventually just wanted to plant something instead of burn it. Archaeological evidence shows both lavish warrior graves and quiet farming tools buried beside them. You wonder which legacy you're building now. The children fall asleep beside the fire. You sit a while longer. When you rise, the stranger hands you a length of cord and a needle. Time to choose your colors, she says. You raise an eyebrow. For the fight, you'll want to be recognized and remembered. You sit cross-legged on the floor, the fire crackling to your left, the cord and needle lying in your lap like an invitation. Or maybe a challenge. The stranger doesn't speak again. She just waits. Outside, someone's hammering planks against the north gate. A baby's crying. The wind whistles through the wooden slats overhead, just enough to remind you that the world doesn't care how sentimental you're feeling right now. Choosing colors. You haven't thought about that in years. Back in your raiding days, you wore red, deep, wine-colored wool with black trim. You chose it not because it looked good, but because it hid blood. Most did. Not very poetic, but practical. Others chose blue, which cost more, thanks to wood or imported dye. Wealth signaled itself in the fabric. Fringe warriors wore scraps. But leaders, they picked something bold, or nothing at all, letting their scars do the talking. You touch the cord, and remember the feel of armor against your skin, the weight of a shield slung over your back. You remember the last time you marched with a band, your breath clouding in the spring air, your boots sinking into wet moss. You remember the songs, the dumb jokes, the clinking of iron, the roaring hush before the first axe landed. And then, the end. You didn't fall in battle. You walked away. You reach for indigo wool and dull bronze thread. Not flashy, not forgettable. That feels right. You sew slowly, your fingers stiff with age and disuse. The pattern isn't anything symbolic, just a jagged knot echoing the same one that once marked your war cloak. When you finish, the stranger takes it from you, brushes away a loose thread, and nods. That'll do. The next morning, the birds are silent. Not one chirp, not one flap. Even the goats seem subdued. You step outside, and the sun is barely up, but you know. You feel it. That hum in your chest, in your ribs. The same one you used to get before a storm or before something caught fire. They're near. No horns, no war cries. That's not how these ones operate. This isn't a siege. It's a message. You climb the watchpost. 3 figures in the distance. Just silhouettes for now, standing at the edge of the tree line like chess pieces, waiting to be moved. You squint. One of them raises a hand. It's not a greeting. You descend, fast. You gather the others. You help string the pitch lines, position the buckets of stone and sand, check that the side entrance is still hidden. You're not the only one moving quickly. The stranger is everywhere, giving signals, counting arrows, whispering words into ears that already seem to know what they're hearing. You don't ask who trained her, you just follow. Midday arrives without a single movement from the trees. But tension. Oh, it's thick enough to chew. Finally, just as the sun leans toward the western slope, they step forward. 3 riders, 2 men, One woman. They're not in battle gear. No helmets. No face paint. Just cloaks. Long, travel-worn, dust-stained. But the way the villagers freeze when they see them says enough. You recognize one instantly. Your old second-in-command. Or rather, the man who wanted your place. Tall, scarred, with eyes like dull iron, and a voice that used to command ships with just a glance. His name isn't important, not anymore. He stops 10 paces from the gate. You've built quite the nest, he says, loud enough for everyone to hear. But we came for a bird. You step forward, not too close, just enough. I'm not flying anywhere. A flicker of something crosses his face. Disgust, maybe, or disappointment. It's hard to tell with men like him. Emotion always looks like strategy. He gestures behind him. More figures step from the trees now. A dozen, 2 dozen, some old faces, some new. None are smiling. You left blood on our hands, he says, and songs in our throats. But no path forward. You tilt your head. So you came for revenge? He shrugs. Closure. Historians still argue whether Viking bands operated under structured rules of betrayal and punishment, or if vendettas were personal affairs spun into legend after the fact. Some claim that leaders who abandoned raids were hunted for years. Others argue that desertion was common, quietly accepted. So long as the deserter didn't thrive, you, unfortunately, have thrived. We don't need a war, you say. No, he replies. But we brought one. The first arrow lands in the gate, not fired to kill, but to mark the beginning. You don't wait for a speech. You shout a signal. The buckets go up. The pitch pours down. Flames leap into the dry afternoon air with a satisfying whoosh. And then everything moves. The village isn't trained, not in the way your old band is, but they're fast, precise, angry in all the right ways. Traps are sprung, fires lit, gates slammed. You duck an axe, catch a spear, and pivot like you're 20 years younger. The stranger fights like she was born in chaos. You lose sight of her twice, each time expecting the worst, each time relieved when she pops up again, smeared in ash, but grinning. At one point, your old second charges straight for you. You meet him halfway. No poetry, just metal and breath and weight. The fight is ugly, short, exhausting. You're not sure who lands the final blow, but when it's done, he's on the ground, and you're not. After that, they flee. Not in defeat, not quite, but in understanding. You won't be hunted anymore. The villagers gather slowly, bruised, bleeding, soot-covered, but alive. You stand in the center, the indigo cloth still tied to your shoulder, now singed and stained. And you laugh. Not loud, not manic, just the quiet, relieved kind. You're still standing. The stranger joins you. Now what? You ask. She shrugs. We rebuild, or we celebrate, or we just breathe. You like that last part. You nod. And for the first time in years, you don't feel like someone who forgot to pillage. You feel like someone who finally chose something better. You sleep that night with the window shutter cracked open, just enough to let in the night air and the faint smell of burnt wood. The stars hang steady above the village, indifferent and unmoved, but you've never felt more grounded. Your body aches in all the places it used to, but this time, the pain is earned and oddly comforting. In the morning, no one asks you to give a speech. There's no horn blast, no ceremonial toast, just the usual sounds of life stubbornly pressing forward. Boots on dirt, goats bleating for breakfast, someone sharpening a blade, not for war, but for cooking. It's funny. In the old days, you would have held a victory feast, burned meat until it crisped, passed around a horn full of mead, until the sky blurred into laughter and blackout. Now, you just want bread and quiet. You walk to the longhouse, where the hearth still smolders. A few others are already there, tending wounds, chewing slowly, no one quite ready to make eye contact. The stranger sits in the corner, wrapping a linen strip around her arm, teeth clenched. You nod to her. She nods back. That's all you need. A child enters and hands you something. A wooden comb, wide-toothed, carved with uneven lines, like someone was practicing runes and got bored halfway through. You recognize it as one of the lice combs, a tool, but also a gesture. You crouch and say thank you. He shrugs like it's no big deal. But it is. That comb isn't about grooming. It's about staying, about belonging. The rest of the day passes in fragments. You help patch the north gate. You pour water onto charred thatch. You sit with a man whose brother didn't make it and say nothing, because nothing helps. You boil barley until it sticks to the pot. You almost feel normal. Almost. By evening, the stranger finds you again. Walk with me, she asks. You do. You wander toward the edge of the village, past the boundary stones, and into the thinning trees. The light is syrupy and golden, like the sun's trying to apologize for the fire. You both walk in silence until you reach a place where the trees give way to a clearing. There's a small stream here, slow-moving, shallow, lined with moss and stones, worn smooth by centuries of repetition. She sits. You sit. The stranger pulls something from her pouch, a sliver of bone, pale and sharp, like a shark tooth. A needle, you guess. She nods. For sewing wounds, or cloaks, or stories, if you're clever enough. You glance at her sideways. And what's this one for? She doesn't answer directly. Do you know how many people die because they think they can't change? She asks. Because they think who they were yesterday is the same as who they have to be tomorrow. You sigh. I know a few. She flicks the needle into the stream. It spins, sinks, gone. You changed, she says simply. You laugh. I stopped killing people. That's not exactly evolution. No, she says, but it's a start. The sky is turning bruised now. Lavender at the edges, dark blue bleeding in. The night insects begin their chorus, and the sound is both eerie and oddly soothing. Historians still argue whether Viking outcasts had places to go. You murmur, more to yourself than to her. If there were villages that would take them, if the old blood feuds were always enforced. She leans back on her hands. Maybe they argue because they think it has to be one way or the other. Blood or exile, shame or glory. You close your eyes and let the evening wash over you. Maybe they argue because they've never sat by the stream. She stands. So do you. Come on, she says. Tomorrow we finish rebuilding the storage house, and someone needs to make sure the flour barrels weren't soaked. You grunt. Wasn't planning to sleep in anyway. The path back is lit by moonlight now, the trees casting long, spider-legged shadows across the ground. In the distance, someone starts singing. Not loud, not joyful, just a low hum. A work song. A staying alive song. Back in the village, you pass a man teaching his daughter how to restring a bow. He waves, you wave. The bowstring twangs softly, like a harp out of tune. Inside your hut, the bed looks less like a pile of hay and more like an invitation. You lie down and listen to the sounds around you. Chickens rustling, a baby coughing, someone chopping herbs for tomorrow's stew. Mundane things, life-saving things. You drift, not into sleep just yet, but into thought. This life isn't a punishment. It's a second verse. And not every Viking needs to rhyme with the first. The rooster doesn't crow. Instead, it's the soft creak of a door that pulls you from sleep. A tired hinge groaning against the cold morning air. You blink, not quite ready to rise, but the scent of peat smoke and fresh dough makes the decision for you. You stretch your limbs, slow and steady, as if each bone wants to stay wrapped in slumber just a little longer. But today isn't for dreaming. Today is for repair, for rebuilding things you once thought were beyond saving, like houses and maybe yourself. You wander outside barefoot. The dirt is cool. The fog has settled like a blanket across the field, wrapping the world in white silence. Your breath curls like a ghost in front of your face. And in this stillness, something shifts inside you, subtle but real. You're not a guest here anymore. There's a rhythm now. You're part of it. You help dig a trench to divert rainwater from the food stores. You patch holes in the wall with hands that once tore things down. A boy hands you a stone, and you pass it without question to the next in line. No one speaks much. They just do. It's comforting, really. This shared understanding that some things get done not because they're glorious, but because they're necessary. The opposite of raiding in every way. During a short break, you sit by a small group weaving new baskets. One of the elders, a hunched woman with fingers like twisted branches, nods at you and mutters, "Didn't think you'd stay." You nod back. "Didn't think I would either." She chuckles, then adds, "But that comb looked good on you." You're about to laugh when she reaches into a pouch and pulls out something unexpected, an iron pin, long, sharp, slightly bent at the tip. "For brooches," she explains, "or sometimes for settling arguments." You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. "Depends on the mood." The others snicker, and the moment passes in quiet ease. By midday, the fog has lifted and the sun peers cautiously through scattered clouds. You help repair the thatched roof of the smokehouse, passing bundles of reeds like offerings to the sky. A drop of sweat rolls down your neck. Another, then another. You're soaked before you even realize it. The man next to you sighs and mutters, "Remind me why I didn't become a monk." You reply, "Because monks don't get to flirt with blacksmiths." He cackles, and you almost lose your balance on the rafter. Down below, the blacksmith in question looks up, smirking. She rolls her eyes, then returns to hammering a blade that will probably be used to chop fish, not flesh. Later, you return to your hut and strip off your damp tunic. You toss it over the post and collapse onto your straw mat, letting the heat from your body cool slowly against the earthen floor. For a moment, you drift again. When you wake, something's off. There's a shadow near the door, not threatening, just unfamiliar. You sit up. It's the old man who watched you weeks ago during that first meal, when you felt like an invader, wearing shame like a second skin. He enters slowly, favoring one knee, and sits beside you without asking. "You know," he begins, "there's a word we used to have. Can't remember the old tongue for it, but it meant something like a nail. Not the kind you hammer. The kind that holds a ship together when the water gets mean." You nod, unsure what to say. He scratches his beard, then adds, "You don't look like a nail, but you're holding." That's it. No praise, no absolution, just a Viking-sized metaphor and a grunt as he leaves. You sit with that for a long while. After dark, the village gathers again, this time around a fire that isn't meant for defense or mourning, but warmth, comfort. Children tumble in the grass, wrapped in wool and squeals. Someone strums a lyre off-key, and no one minds. There's a stew bubbling, thick with whatever they managed to salvage from the stores. You sit between two men, arguing over whether ravens or crows are smarter. One insists ravens remember faces. The other says that's just folklore. Historians still argue whether ravens were messengers or just opportunists. Someone adds, from the far side of the fire. You glance at the sky. Somehow, the stars seem closer than usual. The woman with the scar across her cheek tosses a bone into the flames and says, "So when are you leaving?" You blink. "Who says I am?" She smiles, not smug, but surprised. "Guess you don't look like someone who forgets to leave." You think about that, about all the leaving you've done, and all the not looking back. But here, you glance at the boy who gave you the lice comb, now asleep under a sheepskin beside the fire. You see the blacksmith pass a bowl to a man missing 2 fingers. You hear the crooked laugh of the basket weaver. Maybe staying isn't forgetting. Maybe it's remembering something you didn't know you'd lost. You lean back, elbows in the dirt, eyes on the fire. And for the first time in a long time, you let yourself believe that maybe, just maybe, you're not a mistake someone else has to correct. You're a nail, bent maybe, but holding. The wind shifts that night. Not a storm, no rain, no thunder, but a strange tension in the breeze. Like the land itself is holding its breath. You feel it in your bones before anyone says a word. By dawn, it's clear. A messenger arrives, dust-covered, half-starved, and hoarse from shouting across valleys. He collapses near the communal fire, clutching a carved token in one hand, a symbol from a neighboring clan. Urgent news, not war, not yet, but trouble. The nearby fjord village has been raided, not by foreigners, not by faceless enemies from distant lands, by someone they knew, someone who once shared their bloodline. The air around the fire crackles with more than heat. Men stand slowly, murmuring curses under their breath. Women whisper to each other, hands drifting instinctively to children's shoulders. It's the kind of news that wakes up old wounds, the ones buried just deep enough to forget. You sit quietly, absorbing the mood. You know that look. You've worn it yourself. Someone's going to act, not out of vengeance, out of duty. And sure enough, by midday, the longboats are being readied. But not all of them. Not for conquest or grand expedition. Just a small group. Enough to deliver a message. Maybe make a show of strength. You're asked to join. Not because you're a warrior, not anymore, but because you know what it looks like when a man chooses to break trust. And maybe because you now represent something they don't fully understand yet. A traitor who stayed. You pack light, a change of linen, your comb, a tiny jar of salve, the iron pin the old woman gave you, tucked neatly into your belt. You step into the boat. The water is calm, but your stomach isn't. The oars dip silently, rhythmically. No one sings, no one speaks. Hours pass this way, until land rises like a bruise on the horizon. A misty shore, silent, still. You disembark slowly, your boots sinking into mud that smells of salt and fish guts. Ahead, the village seems wrong. Not burned, not broken, but hollow, like it was emptied of its soul. You follow the others to the largest house. Inside, you find the remnants of a struggle, scattered bowls, a cracked bench, the faint smell of fear lingering like smoke. But no bodies, just absence. And then, a sound, a creak. From the far corner, behind a half-collapsed wall, a man emerges. You know that face, older now, weathered, but unmistakable. He was at your naming feast. You remember him singing something off-key and loud, soaked in mead, bragging about your family's strength. Now, he holds a blade not quite pointed at you. I heard they kept you, he spits. You stay still. They should have cut you down, like they did your brother. You say nothing. Around you, the others shift uneasily. This isn't what they came for. They came for peace, or posturing, not this. You take a step forward, slowly. I didn't come to beg, you say, voice calm. Didn't come to judge either. He snarls, but his hand wavers. You came to prove something, he accuses. You consider that. Maybe I did, you reply. Or maybe I came to remember that we weren't always like this. Silence. He lowers the blade, only an inch. The others don't move. They're letting you decide what happens next. And so you do something strange. You reach into your pouch, pull out the iron pin, and toss it to the ground between you. He flinches, then blinks. You want a weapon? You ask. Use that. He looks at it, then back at you. Then he laughs, bitter, broken, but real. Still dramatic, he mutters. You smile faintly, and you're still loud when you drink. That night, the two villages share a fire, a wary one. No singing, no speeches, just dried fish passed hand to hand, and tired men watching the horizon like it might bite them. The man from earlier sits across from you, a younger boy at his side. His son, maybe, maybe not. You're not sure. But you see how the boy glances at you, not with fear, but curiosity. Like he's trying to figure out what kind of Viking forgets to pillage. You let him wonder. You let yourself breathe. Because for the first time, you're not here to destroy. You're here to remind them what staying feels like. Even if it means standing in the middle of two worlds that don't quite know what to do with you. Even if it means leaving again, just a little, so you can return with something more than silence. And maybe, just maybe, keep someone else from forgetting what peace looks like. You sleep lightly that night, not from fear, but from habit. The kind of half-sleep you learned on boats, when every creak might mean weather turning, or a blade slipping from its sheath. Your eyes flutter open at the sound of someone stirring. Just the boy, adding wood to the fire, careful not to wake the others. He glances at you. You nod. He nods back. That's all. By morning, your small party is ready to return. There's no formal agreement, no shaking of hands. But the man from the village walks with you to the shore, his shoulders a little less tight. He doesn't apologize. Vikings rarely do, but he watches your face like he's memorizing it. Still think you should have left with the others, he mutters, just as the boats push off. Maybe I did, you reply. He doesn't answer. He just watches until you vanish into the mist again. Back in your own village, the news of the journey spreads slowly. No one calls it a victory. No one celebrates. But a quiet satisfaction hums through the halls, like a festering tooth finally pulled. Something painful but necessary. You're met with nods instead of cheers. Silent acknowledgement. A kind of trust restored by action, not words. You return to your corner of the long house. Your things are where you left them. Your tools, your blanket, even the dried herbs the healer woman gave you. Life resumes, but not quite as before, because people begin coming to you, not just to talk, but to ask. A young man with shaking hands wants to know how to lash his boat so it rides better in rough waters. An older woman asks if you've ever tried mixing lard with ground chamomile. It's for cracked heels, and she thought you'd appreciate the comfort. Someone even brings you a comb, not as a gift, as a request. It's broken, snapped down the middle. You hold it in your hands, study the grain of the wood, the curve of the tines. Then you start to fix it, quietly, carefully. It's not that you've become a mystic or a leader. You're still just you. But there's something magnetic about a Viking who returns. Especially one who doesn't flinch from lice or silence or awkward conversations about runaway cousins who burned a hut. Your reputation, ironically, grows not for the things you destroyed, but for the things you preserved. You find yourself watching the seasons shift, not because you're planning to leave, but because they matter more now. When to dry the herbs, when to boil the tar for waterproofing boots, when the river's ice will finally crack enough for fishing lines again. You're not a farmer. Not yet. But you've started to notice how things grow, how they die, how they come back different. And here's a small, strange thing. You've started singing. Not loudly, not well. Just little tunes. Half-remembered chants from your childhood. The kind sailors mumble when the fog is thick and the mead's worn off. It's not about the music. It's about the rhythm, the habit, the holding on. Someone hears you one evening and asks you to sing at a birth. You're confused. I don't even know lullabies, you say. Doesn't matter, the mother says. Just sing something that didn't come from war. So you do. You sit near her as she labors through the night, and you hum something tuneless and slow, your voice just loud enough to drown out the creak of the beams above and the occasional gasp of pain. When the baby arrives, she presses the infant into your arms for a second, just a second, and says, "He'll need someone who remembers how not to leave." You don't know what to do with that, so you just rock the baby gently until someone wiser takes over. You're no sage, No warrior, not anymore. But you are something. You are the one who came back, who chose the long, boring path of staying, who understands that brushing out lice and carving spoons and fixing combs is not less than raiding. It's what remains after the raid is done. The things you've built don't make noise, but they last longer than fire. One day, as you're sitting on a bench near the sea, watching gulls pick at the bones of yesterday's fish haul, the healer woman joins you. She says nothing for a long while. Then, without looking at you, she says, "You're starting to look like a man with roots." You chuckle. "Maybe just tired feet." She doesn't laugh. Instead, she hands you a jar. Inside is something pale, thick, and oddly fragrant. "What is it?" you ask. "Soap," she says, "with mint and crushed oyster shell." You raise an eyebrow. "For the ones who stay clean," she adds. You nod, then sniff. It smells fine. Probably better than rendered goat fat, at least. You tuck it into your pouch and watch the sea. And for a moment, you wonder if that other version of you, the one who might have stayed with the raiders, taken gold and fame and fire, would recognize the man you've become. Probably not. But maybe, just maybe, he'd envy you. Just a little. Because there's a different kind of strength in staying. The kind that doesn't need a sword or a song to prove it. Just a comb. And a soft place to sleep. A chill rain rolls in the next day. Sleet at first, then just enough icy drizzle to make you regret every decision that led you outside. You hunch your shoulders and tug the wool cloak tighter. But your boots still find every muddy rut, every freezing puddle. Still, you walk. Because you've started keeping track of small things. A new knot in the fishing net. A spot where the hillside crumbles just a little more after each rain. The way one of the goats limps but still climbs higher than the others. You never noticed these things before. Not when your eyes were always fixed on the horizon. But now, you notice everything. The healer woman jokes that you're turning into a hedge witch. You don't deny it. Today, though, you're out here for something a little stranger. You've been asked to help oversee a burial. Not of a warrior, not of a jarl, just a woodworker, elderly, quiet, lived alone on the edge of the village with hands that shaped planks smoother than any you'd ever sat on. He never raided, never shouted, barely spoke. But people respected him. And when his heart finally stopped after an evening of carving spoons, someone whispered your name, said you'd know what to do. You don't, but you go. The burial site is simple. A narrow ridge overlooking the fjord. The mist hangs low and lazy around the rocks. Someone's already cleared the brush and set down the stones. You bring what you were told. The comb he always used, worn to a polish at the handle. A sliver of birch bark with runes scratched into it. and a tin of ash, salve he swore by for his knuckles. They go into the grave with him, not because they're valuable, but because they were his. One woman hums an old dirge, barely audible over the wind. Another tosses in a piece of salted bread. You press your hand to the earth once the mound is covered, then brush the dirt from your palms and stand. The people linger, not out of grief exactly, but because the moment is quiet and there's something in that silence. They don't want to leave. You eventually do. Back at the longhouse, someone's sharpened the fire steel. It strikes on the first go, the sparks leaping into the kindling like they've been waiting. You feed the flame with dry moss, then settle in and watch the smoke curl toward the roof. A boy sits nearby, stitching a worn cloak. "Do you think he'll come back?" he asks, suddenly, not looking up. "Who?" you ask. "The woodworker. In the afterlife." You consider the question not as a priest would, but as someone who's lived long enough to know that answers are never as important as intentions. "Maybe," you say, "if there's carving to be done." The boy seems satisfied. You stay by the fire longer than you mean to, because warmth, like truth, sneaks up slowly and leaves faster than you'd like. Later, you carve again, not for war, not even for utility. You carve for the sake of it. A piece of driftwood becomes a stylized bird, too lumpy to fly, too narrow to perch. But it pleases you in the way it feels under your fingers. The smoothness, the curve, the simple act of shaping something instead of breaking it. A girl walks by and pauses. "What is it?" she asks. "Not sure," you reply. "Looks like it wants to be a spoon." "Maybe," you say. "Or maybe it just wants to be what it is." She shrugs, but she smiles. The carving goes on your shelf, not to be used, just to be seen. That night, your dreams are calm. No fire, no storm. Just the soft rhythm of waves, the creak of rope, the smell of salted wind. And in the dream, the man you once were, sword at his hip, scars on his cheek, sits across from you. He doesn't speak. He just nods. Not approval, not judgment, just acknowledgement. You wake with a quiet sigh. No one's calling your name. No one's banging a shield. The day begins gently. There's mead to be brewed, a fire to be fed, a stray dog scratching outside the doorway that needs a name and possibly a home. You'll take care of it. Not because you must, but because that's what you do now. You tend. You stay. Snow arrives overnight, soundless and smug, as if it's been planning its entrance for days. You don't hear it fall. You feel it. A shift in the air. A hush so complete even the wind tiptoes. When you step outside, the world is different. Blanketed. Not in the suffocating way, but in the comforting sense. Like someone draped the village in a thick woolen cloak stitched with 1,000 tiny flakes. You leave shallow boot prints behind you as you walk. No rush, just the rhythm of breath, the crunch underfoot, and the occasional flurry blown sideways across your cheek. The longhouse roof groans under the weight. Smoke curls slowly from the vent, sweet with pine and lingering herbs. Inside, everything smells of heat. You shake the snow from your shoulders and stamp your feet. But no one even looks up. It's too early for commotion. Someone ladles out barley porridge near the hearth. Someone else snores in a half-finished cloak. You nod toward the boy from before, now half asleep beside a basket of fish hooks. He gives a lazy wave. You settle in. These days, no one calls you warrior. You're not even visitor anymore. Just part of the furniture, like the long bench with the loose peg or the stool that always wobbles. There's comfort in that. Outside, a girl is brushing snow from the goat pen with a broom made of bundled twigs. The goats grumble like old men, but follow her anyway. You admire her persistence. A decade ago, you would have ignored that detail. Today, it's the whole story. Later, as the sun limps across the gray sky, you find yourself at the edge of the village again. There's a tree stump there, your unofficial seat. You bring a strip of linen and start threading it with dyed wool. Not because you're good at weaving, but because your hands like to move while your thoughts drift. You think of a time when you stood on a foreign shore, sword in hand, watching a city burn, not with pride, not even with guilt, just as a fact, like remembering a fever dream. You think of the day you were supposed to sail again and didn't. That morning, the sea had glared up at you like a dare, and you said no. Historians still argue whether every Viking longed for battle glory, or if that's just the version we kept because it looked better on tapestries. Maybe there were always a few like you, wandering off the page, planting carrots instead of flags, whispering bedtime stories instead of battle cries. You rise from the stump and stretch your back. A raven lands on a nearby post, feathers puffed, beady eyes watching. You nod, half serious. Not today, you murmur. The raven tilts its head and flies off. By late afternoon, the longhouse is busier. A child has lost a boot. A couple argues gently over how long to soak the barley. You hear laughter. You smell fresh bread. And you remember something the healer said once. Staying is its own kind of courage. At the time, you shrugged. Now you think she might have been right. You help repair a door hinge. You refill the woodpile. You even comb a lice-ridden boy's hair because someone has to, and your hands are steady. That night, while the fire pops and the wind clutches the eaves like a drunk uncle, you share a drink with the Jarl. He's older now, less bark, more weariness in the eyes. You were meant to go east, he says. You nod. Do you regret staying? You swirl the mead in your horn. Watch the reflection of the fire dance across it. Sometimes, you admit, but not today. He chuckles. Fair enough. The cup empties. The room stills. And silence, again, becomes your truest companion. Tomorrow will be cold, maybe colder than today. There's a fence to fix, a neighbor who needs help with a broken axle, a boy who wants to learn how to whittle without slicing open his thumbs. You'll show him, you'll show up, and no one will write a saga about it. No skald will sing of the man who once sailed and stopped. But here, in this small place, your name lives quietly, not on stone, but in memory, not in legend, but in life. And that's enough. So now, let the snow keep falling. Let it dust the rooftops, the empty cartwheels, the trail leading down to the fjord. Let it soften the sounds of wood splitting and children laughing. Let it blur the bootprints until there's no beginning and no end. You've heard the tales of warriors and conquerors, of ships lost and found, of names carved into rock. But sometimes, the quiet ones, those who step aside, who plant seeds instead of swords, tell the truest stories. Stories made of gestures, of listening, of showing up day after day with nothing more than your hands and your heart. Here in this world, far from banners and battle drums, your presence is enough. You are enough. Let the fire dim now. Let your eyes grow heavy. Outside, the goats are silent. The raven has gone. The longhouse breathes with the rhythm of sleep. You rest your head against the thick furs. You think of the snow falling. You think of the life you chose. And as sleep finds you, soft as smoke, you let go of the sword, the sea, the saga. Just for tonight, you are here. And here is home.